The financial analyst stopped mid-sentence. On his computer screen, a pattern emerged that made no sense. 17 seemingly random stock trades, executed in 43 seconds, that would net someone $213,000 by market close. Whoever made these moves understood market behavior at a level that took most traders 20 years to develop. He checked the account holder's age, 22 years old. He checked the name, Kiera Simmons. And then he did what would change both their lives. He picked up the phone. But we're getting ahead of ourselves, because to understand how a girl who aged out of foster care at 18, with nothing but a trash bag of clothes, ended up making millionaires nervous, you need to know about the pattern she saw that no one else could see. Kiera was 7 when the social worker pulled her from her 3rd foster home. Not because anyone hit her, not because they didn't feed her, because she creeped them out. That's what Mrs. Patterson told the case manager. The girl just sat there, rocking, touching her fingers together in the same sequence over and over. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. For hours. And she wouldn't stop talking about numbers. How many tiles on the kitchen floor. How many times the refrigerator hummed before the compressor kicked on. How the pattern of Mr. Patterson's breathing changed exactly 47 seconds before he was about to yell. "She's not normal," Mrs. Patterson said. Like that settled everything. "We can't handle her." They used different words at the next home, and the next. Special needs. Difficult. On the spectrum. As if naming it made it easier to give up on her. If you want to see how Kiera's gift for patterns changed everything, please hit that like button. It helps us share more stories like this. Subscribe if you haven't already. Back to Kiera. She was 11 when she landed with the Holloways. Margaret Holloway was 63 years old, black like Kiera, with silver hair she wore in twists and hands that had held more broken children than she could count. Her house in suburban Columbus, Ohio, smelled like cinnamon and old books. She had one biological son, Jason, who was 21, and away at college studying engineering. "You like numbers?" Margaret asked the first night, watching Kiera count the pattern on the wallpaper. Kiera didn't look up. 17 vertical, 23 horizontal in this room, 391 total visible from this chair. "Huh." Margaret sat down across from her. "What else do you see?" No one had ever asked her that before. Most people told her to stop, to be normal, to look at them when they talked. Margaret just waited, like Kiera's answer mattered more than her eye contact. "The clock in the kitchen," Kiera said slowly. "It's 3 seconds fast. It's been fast for 47 days based on the dust pattern on the wall behind it. You haven't moved it in 47 days, which means you probably dusted on a Tuesday because that's the day the trash truck comes, and the vibration would have shifted the dust if the clock had been moved recently." Margaret smiled, not the nervous smile adults gave her before, a real one. "Tuesday's my cleaning day. Have been for 30 years. Something in Kiera's chest unclenched, just slightly. But Margaret's house had rules. School every day, no matter how the fluorescent lights made Kiera's skin crawl. Dinner at the table, even if the sounds of forks on plates felt like needles in her ears. And 1 hour every evening where Kiera could do whatever she wanted with numbers. That's when Margaret brought home the newspaper. Business section. Stock tables. "My late husband used to read these," Margaret said. "Never made sense to me. All those numbers. Maybe you can tell me what they mean." Kiera stared at the columns, and for the first time in her life, something clicked into place that felt like coming home. The numbers weren't random. They were patterns. Beautiful, intricate patterns that most people couldn't see because they were looking for the wrong things. They wanted big jumps, quick wins. But Kiera saw the subtle rhythms underneath, the way certain stocks moved in response to others, not immediately, but with a delay that followed mathematical sequences. The way trading volume ebbed and flowed in patterns that matched, she counted back. Patterns that matched seasonal employment data from 3 months prior. She filled notebooks. Margaret didn't stop her. She just kept bringing home newspapers, then showed Kiera how to use the computer to track stocks in real time. "You see something, baby?" Margaret would ask. Kiera would nod, fingers flying across the keys. "This one's going to drop, not today. 11 days from now, by 14%. "How do you know?" "The pattern. It's the same as last March, same as the March before. Only this time, the volume's wrong. Too many people buying. They're going to panic." 11 days later, the stock dropped by 15%. Margaret didn't understand it, but she believed in it. Believed in Kiera, and that made all the difference. Jason came home for Thanksgiving that year. He was tall, white like his father had been, with dark hair and his mother's kind eyes. He found Kiera in the living room at 2 in the morning, surrounded by printouts of stock charts. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "The market opens in 4 hours in Tokyo," Kiera said, not looking up. "I need to see if the pattern holds." He sat down beside her. Didn't tell her to go to bed. Didn't treat her like she was weird. He just asked, "What pattern?" She showed him. The complex web of relationships she'd mapped between 17 different stocks across 3 markets. How they moved in sequence, like dominoes, but only if you knew where to look. "That's incredible," he said, and she could hear that he meant it. "You see all this just by looking at the numbers?" "I see what everyone else misses." The words came out harder than she meant. "Because everyone else thinks I'm the one who's missing something." Jason was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "My mom sees you. The real you. That's why you're here." Something about the way he said it made Kiera look up, made her meet his eyes, even though it felt like staring into the sun. He smiled at her, not with pity, with respect. "I see you too," he said, "and I think you're going to change the world." The years passed. Kiera stayed with Margaret, the first placement that lasted. She graduated high school a year early because the patterns in calculus and physics made perfect sense to her. While other kids went to parties, she sat in Margaret's kitchen, building mock portfolios with imaginary money. Every single one would have made her rich, but she had nothing. No money to invest, no credit to her name, no family except Margaret, who lived on a fixed income and had already given her more than anyone else ever had. Jason visited when he could. He'd graduated and was working as an engineer in Cleveland, 2 hours north. Every visit, he'd ask about her portfolios. Listen as she explained strategies that would have made hedge fund managers weep. And every visit, Kiera felt something growing in her chest that she didn't have words for. She was 17 when she finally understood it. Jason was home for Christmas. They were walking through the neighborhood looking at lights, and he'd adjusted his pace so his longer strides matched hers without her having to ask. Such a small thing. But he'd noticed. He always noticed. "I got an offer," he said. "Company in Seattle. More money. Big promotion." Her heart dropped. The pattern of their lives was about to shift, and she couldn't stop it. "That's good," she managed. "I turned it down." She stopped walking. "Why?" He looked at her then, really looked at her. "Because everyone I care about is here. Mom's getting older. And you." He stopped, started again. "You're going to do something amazing, Kiera, and I want to be here to see it." She couldn't speak, could barely breathe, because she understood then that he saw her the same way she saw the patterns, clearly, completely, without needing her to be anything other than exactly what she was. "I'm going to age out soon," she whispered. 18. Then I'm just nothing. Another kid the system forgot about. You're not nothing. His voice was fierce. "And you're not going to be forgotten. Not by me. Not by Mom. You're family, Kiera. You always have been." But the system didn't care about family that wasn't legally bound. On her 18th birthday, her case closed. Margaret begged to keep her, but the house was paid for by foster care payments that stopped the day Kiera became an adult. Margaret's Social Security wasn't enough for two. "You can stay until you find something," Margaret said, crying. "I don't care what they say." But Kiera had already calculated it. The math was brutal and clear. Margaret couldn't afford her. The kindest thing she could do was leave. She lasted 3 months in a shelter, working 2 part-time jobs that barely covered a phone bill and transportation, sleeping in a room with 11 other women, saving every penny, and investing. She'd opened an account with $73. It was all she had. Most brokers would have laughed, but this was the age of smartphone apps and zero-fee trading. The barrier to entry was finally low enough for someone like her to enter. The first trade netted her $8, the second, $13. She moved carefully, following patterns only she could see, reinvesting everything, sleeping 4 hours a night because she was tracking markets across time zones. 6 months later, she had $4,000. A year after that, $47,000. She'd moved into a tiny apartment, quit one of her jobs, spent every free moment staring at screens, seeing patterns emerge like constellations that had always been there, waiting for someone with the right eyes to notice them. She was 22 when she made the trade that caught their attention, a complex series of options plays that required understanding correlation patterns across 17 different sectors. She saw it, executed it, and in 43 seconds, she'd positioned herself to make $200,000. That's when the phone rang. "Ms. Simmons, this is Trevor Hastings from Westfield Investment Group. I'd like to discuss your trading activity." Her heart stopped. She'd done something wrong. They were going to freeze her account, take everything. I didn't do anything illegal," she said, hating how small her voice sounded. "Illegal? No. Ms. Simmons, I want to offer you a job." The world tilted. They flew her to New York, put her in front of a team of analysts who'd been trading for decades, asked her to explain what she saw. She showed them the patterns within patterns, the mathematical relationships that governed seemingly random market movements, the way human behavior filtered through millions of transactions, created predictable rhythms for those who knew how to listen. One of the analysts, a man named Richard, who'd made partner at 30, actually laughed, not cruelly, in wonder. "I've been doing this for 18 years, he said, "and I've never seen anyone spot correlations like this. You have a gift." The word hit her strange. Gift. The thing that had gotten her rejected from 7 foster homes. The thing that made her too weird, too different, too much. That was a gift? "We'd like to start you at $170,000, Trevor said, "with performance bonuses. Based on what I've seen, you could be making 7 figures within 3 years. She thought of Margaret, working until she was 63, retiring on Social Security that barely covered her mortgage, giving everything to broken kids the world had thrown away. "I need to make a call first," Kiera said. Margaret cried when she heard, happy tears this time. "Oh, baby. Oh, my sweet girl. I always knew you were going to fly." "I want to pay off your house," Kiera said. "Kiera, no. You believed in me when no one else did. You saw patterns too, just different ones. You saw the pattern of who I could become." The job was everything, and nothing like she'd expected. The work was easy, laughably easy compared to what she'd been doing on her own. The people were harder. They respected her results, but didn't understand her. Still talked over her in meetings, still looked at her strange when she rocked in her chair or touched her fingers in sequence when she was thinking. but the money was real, and it grew. At 24, she had enough to pay off Margaret's house. At 25, enough to set up a trust that would keep Margaret comfortable for life. At 26, her own portfolio had crossed $2 million. And through it all, Jason was there. Not in New York. He'd stayed in Cleveland, stayed close to his mother. But he called every Sunday, visited once a month, and every visit, Kiera felt that unnamed thing growing stronger. She was 27 when Margaret called with news. "Baby, I'm sick. Cancer. They caught it early. But the treatment, it's expensive. Even with insurance, the co-pays. I'll cover it," Kiera said immediately. "All of it. Whatever you need." "Kiera, you saved my life, Margaret. Let me help save yours." She took a leave from work, flew to Columbus, set Margaret up with the best oncologists in the state, and found herself sitting in Margaret's kitchen again, like she was 11 years old, except now she was the one bringing comfort instead of receiving it. Jason took leave too, spent weeks going with his mother to appointments, and late at night, after Margaret was asleep, he and Kiera would sit in the living room where she'd first learned to see the patterns in stocks. "I need to tell you something," he said one night. "I should have said it years ago, but the timing never felt right. And then you left for New York, and I thought maybe I'd missed my chance." Her heart was beating too fast. She touched her fingers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. "I see you, Kiera. I've always seen you. Not the girl everyone else thought was too different. I see the woman who sees things no one else can, who turned nothing into everything through sheer brilliance, who came back for the people she loves, even when she could have just sent money and stayed away." He took a breath. "I see you, and I love you. I think I've loved you since you were 17 and explained market theory to me at 2 in the morning like it was poetry." She couldn't speak, could barely process the words, because no one had ever said them to her before. Not like this. Not meaning all of her. Patterns and fingers and rocking and everything that made her different. "You don't have to say anything," he said quickly. "I just needed you to know. I love you, too." The words burst out. "I didn't have the word for it before, but that's what it is. That's what it's been. You see me. You've always seen me. And that's—" Her voice broke. "That's everything." He kissed her then. Gentle. Careful. Perfect. Margaret beat the cancer. Kiera stayed in Columbus. Westfield let her work remotely. After all, patterns looked the same from anywhere. She bought a house 2 blocks from Margaret's. Jason moved in 6 months later. But something was bothering her. A pattern she couldn't unsee. "There are kids right now in the system," she told Jason one morning. "Kids like I was, who see patterns, who think different, who are getting labeled as problems instead of gifted, and they're aging out with nothing. What are you thinking?" She pulled up the research she'd been doing. "I'm thinking I start a foundation, scholarship specifically for neurodivergent foster youth, but not just money. Mentorship, teaching them to see their differences as strengths, showing them what they could become. How much would something like that cost?" She showed him the projections. It was ambitious. It would take most of her liquid capital to start. Jason smiled. The same smile he'd given her when she was 11 and explaining stock patterns at 2 in the morning. "Do it. You're going to change lives." The Simmons Foundation launched when Kiera was 28. The first year, they helped 17 kids. Kids who'd been in 6, 7, 8 placements. Kids the system had labeled as difficult. Kids who saw patterns, who thought in numbers, who experienced the world in ways that made them seem broken to people who didn't understand. She met with each one personally, showed them what she'd built, told them her story. "You're not broken," she said to a 15-year-old boy who wouldn't stop organizing the coins in his pocket. You're wired different, and that's going to be your superpower. You just need someone to see it. I see it, and I'm going to make sure you have what you need to show the world." She thought of Mrs. Patterson, of every caseworker who'd written difficult to place in her file, of everyone who'd looked at her and seen a problem instead of a gift. And she thought of Margaret, who'd asked what else do you see instead of telling her to stop seeing it. At 30, Kiera's net worth crossed $8 million. She and Jason got married in Margaret's backyard. The foundation was helping 63 kids. 3 of them had already graduated college on full scholarships she'd funded. 2 were working in STEM fields. 1 was studying music theory and composing symphonies based on mathematical patterns. She kept trading, kept seeing patterns no one else saw, kept making money that would have seemed impossible to that 18-year-old sleeping in a shelter with $73 to her name. But the real wealth wasn't the money. It was sitting at Sunday dinner with Margaret and Jason, listening to updates on the kids the foundation was helping. It was getting emails from a 20-year-old autistic girl who'd just landed an internship at NASA. It was knowing that somewhere out there, a social worker was writing highly gifted instead of difficult to place because someone had finally seen the pattern. The financial world called her a genius, said she had instincts that couldn't be taught. But they were wrong. She didn't have instincts. She had a different way of seeing, a way of noticing what others missed because they were too busy looking at her like she was the one missing something. She was wired different, and that difference, the thing that had gotten her rejected and labeled and pitied, that was exactly what the world needed. She'd just needed someone to believe it first. If this story moved you the way it moved us, do me a favor, hit that like button and leave a comment telling us about a time when someone believed in you when no one else did. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that being different isn't a curse. It's often the exact gift the world needs most. And if you know a young person who sees the world differently, be their Margaret. Be the person who asks, "What else do you see?" instead of telling them to stop seeing. You might just change their life. Subscribe for more stories that prove that the people the world overlooks are often the ones who change it forever.